Hi everyone, and welcome back to Leafkins Draw This In Your Style, where I take Draw This In Your Style challenges from around the internet, or let's be honest, mainly Instagram, and guide you through my process of turning them into Leafkins. This episode's challenge is by Flomix on Instagram, and over the course of the video, I'll be taking you from this to this. Let's get started. I start with a pretty literal interpretation of the original drawing, same pose and proportions, and I immediately start having trouble with it. It's not a true contrapposto because the hips and shoulders are going in the same direction, and somehow Flomix is making it work because she's like an art witch and can make things that don't make any sense look really amazing. But I'm having a super huge amount of trouble with it, and I keep erasing and going back over what I drew. I also have trouble figuring out what I want to do with the arm because I hate just dropping arms down to your side in poses and hiding the hands. I feel like it's a little bit lazy, and it just makes you feel like, or it makes you look like you don't know how to draw hands very well, which I don't want to come across as. Even if I do have trouble drawing hands, I'd rather give off the impression that I'm amazing at hands. I'm just the best at hands. One of the first things I do is flip it to do my second round of sketching, and I find that I like it facing that direction a little bit better, so I keep it that way. What initially drew me to this drawing was the hairstyle. I think it looks really cool. I love the braids, I love the bangs, and I really wanted to capture that look of, like, she took a scissor to her own bangs and really cut off a leaf straight on. I think it just makes her look really edgy and cool. You can see I'm still having trouble with that arm. Right now it is dropped to the side, but it won't be by the end, I promise. So like I said in my last video, you'll notice that I'm using this sketching phase as an opportunity to really explore the pose that I want this character to be in. I'm constantly tweaking her arm positions, cutting and pasting, clipping around, resizing. Everything's gonna get cleaned up in future sketches, so you can be as messy as you need to right now. The first thing you'll probably notice going into the inking portion of the video is that this is not the same sketch that we left Photoshop with. The long explanation is that I forgot to turn the screen recording camera on when I was doing my last sketch. So that section of the drawing will forever remain a mystery. Mostly when I ink in Illustrator, I'm using the brush tool, but for the fairly complicated shapes or the really long shapes where I can't make a smooth stroke easily, I'll use the pen tool. I don't really like the pen tool just because it's hard to fiddle with when you have to go into anchor points. I'm really bad at making smooth curves based on just anchor points rather than a smooth brush stroke. And I hate using the smooth tool. I feel like it's cheating. But I guess you do what you gotta do in the drawing world. Once I have all my lines down, or all my lines for the first pass of inking, I raise the weights of all of them up to sort of the middle weight of what I want to use, and then from there go into more specific line weights, making the outlines or the major shapes bigger and then inner details smaller, like in my last video. Then I go through the process of determining whether I want it to taper, and how steep the taper is. It's sometimes difficult to figure out just because the longer the line is in Illustrator, the thinner it looks when you taper it. So I have in my brush pack several taper lengths that I pick from when I go through the lines. Once I have all the lines in a way that I'm happy with, I will select them all, expand the appearance and expand again, and then do an intersection cut in the Pathfinder. I think last time I said I unified everything, but that is incorrect. That's an oversimplification that is not very helpful. But once you go through that process and then you ungroup all of the lines, you can pick off all the overhang so that everything looks like it's of a piece and not just spaghetti noodles on the floor. Once I'm done with my major line work, I'll do a second pass of inking for fine details that I left out, just because it would add too much complexity to the cleanup process if I were to do it all at once. I'll save that for later in a second pass and then clean it up. With the inking done, I bring the lines back into Photoshop and I start laying down the base colors. And initially I just copied sort of the peachy skin tone and used a color hue layer to morph it into a green, thinking to maybe keep the same sort of tone or saturation to the green that was in the original peach color. Eventually I realized that I don't like it very much. It's too much of a lime green, and I end up changing it later in the process. Putting down my hard shadows. For shadows, I use often, most of the time, a dark purple or dark blue to lay them down, and then to get the shadow effect, I'll change it to a color burn and then lower the opacity. But it's much easier to see where you're laying the colors down if you do it at full opacity right off the bat. And the bonus is that it makes it look super dramatic for the duration of laying it down. And then once I have the base shadows down, I move on to the hard highlights. And I think in this drawing, I'm still sort of figuring out how I like doing highlights. As you can see, my technique is not super set in stone. There's a lot of experimentation still at this point that goes into every drawing. But like the shadows, I'll lay them down in just a hard flat white and then change it to often a dodge add layer and then lower the opacity. Once I have the hard shadows down, or intermixed with the hard shadows as I'm doing here, I'll put in the gradients. I always use hard shadows and sort of gradient reflected light to give it a little bit more depth. And I've also added a overall gradient to her hair from the sort of like peachy pink to more of a yellow at the bottom, just to add some visual diversity. I mean, I think it looks really cool. Flowmux in general has just great color work to her art. I would definitely recommend checking out her Instagram channel just for inspiration, or just to look at it. Everything's really pretty. You'll see that I switched up the skin tone. I made it a little bit more desaturated because I think the hair should be the focal piece. I didn't want her skin to be too bright. Gotta get the blush in. I already ranted about that in my last video, or not exactly ranted, but described sort of my fascination with it in my last video. And then with the color grading, I made everything a little bit yellow. I like sort of the retro 80s faded quality in it. So I just upped the yellow and lowered the blue to give it a slightly more washed out tone. And I also decided to go with a sort of screen tone background, along with a faded radial gradient, just so that it doesn't look so flat. There's a little bit of dimension to the background as it fades out to the corners. And here's the final product. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. If you come across a Draw This in Your Style challenge you'd like to see me work on, or have any original art you'd like to see Leafkinized, let me know. I may feature it in a future episode. Also, if you like my art and want to be the first to see new drawings, then follow me on Instagram. I've got a link in my description. Thanks again, everyone, and see you next time.